Hello and welcome everyone to another tier list video where today we will be going over every single tier 1 creature in Heroes of Might and Magic 3 Horn of the Abyss. This is gonna be my subjective tier list, okay? So you might value different creatures for different reasons based on the situations that you had, okay? That's all fine. This is my personal tier list, so I hope you enjoy watching. Then let's get right into it. First up, we have the goblins. Oh, by the way, they're cropped like kind of weirdly, but this is how it goes. The goblin, the tier 1 creature of Stronghold, is kind of interesting, okay? They are speed 5, very generic speed, they have really low HP, and they don't even do a lot of damage as compensation. The only notable feature about these is that their growth is kind of okay, and if you were to go Gretchen, you actually get a lot of them. So you can actually make them work to be somewhat decent, but then again, you usually don't want to, because Wolf Raiders outdo them in almost every single way. Because of that, goblins especially plays in C tier, in my opinion. They're not failures, but they're pretty bad, okay? They're not that good. But the hobgoblins, the upgraded version, actually has a lot of utility. These guys are absolutely wonderful at managing fights. You need someone baited to the other side of the battlefield, hobgoblins do it. You need somebody to take a retail, hobgoblins do it, okay? These guys do everything that you want them to do. They are your go-to utility unit when playing Stronghold. They're like your bread and butter. They make every single hero faster. They support Wolf Raiders very well. I would say they are actually a solid A tier. Not as a power stack, but because of their utility. That's what I think. There we go. Next up, we have the big daddy of tier 1 creatures, the Centaur. These guys are everything that is right with a unit, okay? Centaurs are fast. They are healthy. They have good stats, good damage. You get a decent chunk of them that they actually make up to a decent power stack, even without a specialist to support them. And that's why they are definitely high in the list. Centaur, both as a power stack and as a utility unit, already belongs in the A tier. They are super good. And Centaur Captain is actually what I would call the best tier 1 unit. They are honestly not really rivaled by almost anything. They are such an exceptional unit in between the tier 1s it's actually pretty ridiculous. Really nice. You should always use them. You buy them either day 1 or day 3 on Rampart based on whether you actually go for Grandos on day 2 or day 3. That's the choice that you have to make, and it's a pretty hard choice usually, because Centaur Captains are so good, but Grandos are also so good, so you know, it's always like that kind of choice in Rampy. A very interesting one. Next up, we have the Imp. Now, the Imp is basically like a goblin. Yeah, it's actually honestly a goblin, and that's why it belongs alongside the goblin. It has 5 HP, it's pretty... wait, no, 4 HP. It's pretty squishy, it doesn't deal a lot of damage, it's honestly pretty lackluster. They're really easy to fight on the open battle, they don't make up a good power stack. Now, but Familiars though, if you were to upgrade them, they make as good of a utility unit as Hobgoblin. The reason you don't see Familiars as much as Hobgoblins though is because they're not required in your Inferno build. You see, Stronghold requires Wolf Raiders to function, and to upgrade to Wolf Raiders, you require the upgrade of the Hobgoblins. Meanwhile, Familiars are skippable in Inferno, unlike the Hobgoblins. That's why you see the far less of them. And they actually kind of make up a power stack, and actually quite a relevant power stack. In today's meta of Heroes 3, many people go Ignatius, and then they upgrade Familiars, and then they just search for pickets. And if you find a picket, Familiars don't do a lot of damage, but honestly, it's enough to get a picket down. Because the Wolf Raiders are so squishy. They're so squishy, in fact, that the only thing that you basically need to do is you need to outspeed them. And Familiars do just that on Inferno terrain with the Ignatius specialty. So they are good enough as a unit. As a power stack and good utility, I would put them at actually high A tier, which is pretty surprising for me as well, but the current day, Like a year ago, I would have put them like way below, but Ignatius actually brought them back recently, and that's pretty cool to see. The meta changes based on what's out there. Next up is we have the Gnolls. Now these guys are absolute tanks, okay? They don't have as much HP as the other units, but they feel so tanky, and you also get such a ludicrous amount of them when you start Draken. They're very, very good. These guys can take a maxi picket, a maxi hive on day 1, sorry. And that is ridiculously good. And because of that, even the slow, almost barely unusable Gnolls are already B tier. And the Gnoll Marauder, I would say, is honestly A tier. They are not the best, but they certainly get to Fortress Rolling, which is exactly their role. And even if and they're pretty good meat till the very end game. I do like them. Next up is we have probably the biggest upgrade that you can have in terms of tier 1 creatures. We have the Gremlin and the Master Gremlin, okay? The Gremlin almost has like no purpose, okay? It's D tier. Whenever you don't upgrade them, they are slow, squishy, no damage. Everything that could be bad about a unit is there for the Gremlin. They are abysmal. The only times you would actually consider not upgrading them is when you walk out with your first hero and you like immediately see like 3 highs with easy guides. In that case, Gremlins are actually better in highs than a Master Gremlin, but honestly, usually it's not worth it. You should probably upgrade anyway and just start on another different object. So yeah, with that in mind, the Master Gremlin on the other hand, because you get so many of them, they benefit so much off of Bless, and they do so actually much damage, especially when you buff them. And because of that, I would actually put Master Gremlin in the S tier. So this one simple upgrade puts them from D tier to S tier, which is kind of ridiculous in my opinion. But, you know, that's how it is. They're really, really, really good. You should attempt to bless them whenever you can, either through Master Genies or through your own spellcasting. In that case, you do a lot of damage. The only one downside is this. They have only 8 shots. 8 shots can be possibly not good enough to get an entire fight down if you're counting like lots of golems, lots of trees. But Tower, Blacksmith actually gives you ammo cards. So you actually can, you know, work around this issue. If your only weakness is easily made up for, and the rest of what you have is mostly strengths, then it's a pretty good unit. Light Shop approved. Next up is we have the Pikemen and the Halberdier. These guys are the tankiest of the tier 1 creatures, and that fits very well into the playstyle of modern day castle. What I mean by modern day castle is the fact that we go for a marksman power stack. Back in Shadow of Death, you were to go for a halberdier power stack, but that's not really the case anymore. You almost never see the halberdier upgrade. The only times you see halberdiers is usually either when you play some template where you cannot go for angels on week 1. In that case, you might want to use your turn of building to upgrade some of the other army, like the pikemen, or when you get like a halberdier box. Then to make a bigger power stack, you would upgrade your pikemen to halberdiers as well, and then you would fuse them together. In that case, you have like a pretty good power stack. But most conventional castle builds don't actually include the upgrade. So we mostly see pikemen, and are pikemen good? Pikemen are pretty good. They have one purpose, to keep marksmen alive, and they're damn good at doing that. They have 10 HP, you don't get that many of them, but they honestly tank up like quite a bit. They are very decent meat, and whenever you get a dwelling of these, you get like 140 HP worth of units, which is amazing. Very good. Because of that, I would say pikemen are not good as a power stack, but they do what they have to do in their own faction, and because of that, they deserve the B tier in my opinion. And halberdiers, I would say, basically accomplish everything that the pikemen accomplish, only like a little bit better. Because you have to invest into the building and the gold to upgrade them, and honestly, the biggest cost of the upgrade for halberdiers is the turn of building, because every single time you build some building, you're not building a different one, and castle has a lot of good things to build. Angels, cavaliers, stables, you usually need a marketplace, you know, stuff like that. And usually the halberdier upgrade just doesn't really make the cut. So yeah, they're alongside each other. Next up is we have the Troglodyte and the Infernal Troglodyte. The Troglodyte, in my opinion, is really, really bad, okay? Now, most of the tier 1 creatures are pretty slow, but you end up starting the game in your own biome, and that gives them like a little bit of speed, making them feel less tragic to play. But on templates with no underground, dungeon doesn't actually have their native terrain in the game at all. And worse yet, they spawn in terrain of Necropolis. And what do you want to do in the early game of Heroes 3? Think about this. You want to do crypts for gold, you want to do churchyards for items, okay? And those are under terrain. So not only are they the only faction that doesn't get speed, they also get fight creatures that get extra speed against them, meaning that they are basically always outsped, making them really, really hard to use. They are very, very susceptible to bleeding, especially troglodytes. That's why I would put them at C tier. Like when they're usually used to brute force a hive, and if you're brute forcing a hive, then they're really good at that. But taking the guards for those is hard. Getting to the point that you can deal the hive is pretty hard. Honestly, it's hard life when you're playing troglodytes, in my opinion. Inferno troglodytes do a little bit to mend these issues by having to +1 speed and a little bit more stats, but honestly not enough to put it anywhere above B tier in my opinion. Then next up is we have the Skeleton and the Skeleton Warrior. Okay, listen, this is gonna be the most controversial opinion of the entire tier list. Fuck these units. No, I hate them, okay? They are so bad. The only reason they end up being the most influential tier 1 unit, I agree. They are the most lasting, most influential, most useful power stack in the game that can be animated, build up to extreme ends. But honestly, individually, these units feel really bad to play. They bleed all the time, you have to micromanage them, you basically have to learn an entire new way of fighting fights, you have to do very good splits, you have to basically guess how many stacks the opponent's gonna be at, and then you have to split that many times in order to actually kill all the stacks before they hit you. For a lot of damage, otherwise you're gonna bleed. Now, I would actually feel myself like I'm a pretty decent necro player. I play a good skeleton power stack, but honestly, I hate it almost every single time. These guys are really good. They're like the most usable unit in the game, but they feel really bad to play, and I hate them. So that's why, in my personal tier list, they belong at the bottom. Skeleton Warriors, on the other hand, actually are a solid S tier. Nah, I'm kidding. I would put them like a little bit above these skeletons. C tier. Yes, they are the most influential power stack in the game out of every single one of these available, but I really, really hate them, so there they go. Next up is we have the Sprites and the Pixies. These units are pretty good. They accomplish exactly what you want them to accomplish. Whenever you get an Elementalist or a Planeswalker with army at the start of the game on another faction, all of your heroes are already going to be speed 7 minimum, and that is really nice. I love that. And even on their own faction, they do a lot of good for you. They are like a side power stack that can do quite a bit of damage. They take retals really well, when they're unupgraded at least. So yeah. They are very, very, very easily bled, and whenever you fight any ranged creature, your entire pixie stack is gonna immediately die. If they're touched, they immediately die. So you have to be very, very careful around them, but when you are careful, then they do a pretty decent job. I like them. Because of that, I would give them actually A tier. And pixies are actually, in my opinion, also just A tier alongside them. The upgrade doesn't do that much for them. They lose a lot of utility. They can no longer take retals for the air elementals or, the entire power stack. And because of that, they gain some other advantages like being more speed, no retail can let you take some tricky fights. But honestly, these units are very, very comparable. One is better in some ways, and the other is better in other ways. I would still say the upgraded one is more preferable in most situations, but the fact that HotA nerfed its build path to require Magic University to be built makes it quite a bit worse. And so that upgrade is usually not really worth it. And you don't see the upgraded version like almost at all in Home of the Abyss matches anymore. So there you go. Of course, except when you get them from boxes, but that's a whole nother story. Next up is we have the neutral tier 1 units, the Halfling. Now these guys, of course you never play them, but you know, you can get them from like a mer camp, or you can face them out on the fields, and these guys feel really bad to fight against, okay? They're like master gunners, they just shoot you to death immediately, and there's like a whole bunch of them, so they actually deal pretty substantial damage. Because of that, I would say they are about B tier. And next up is the peasant, okay? There's only one situation when you're happy to see this, and that's when you're playing Necropolis. You're happy to see them in the mer camp, you're happy to see them out on the field. These guys just are skeletons, okay? They're skeletons ready to be made into skeletons. So they belong alongside skeletons. That's how it is. So that is my tier 1 creature tier list. Personally, this is based on my enjoyment and what I think about them. I didn't base them entirely on strength in battle, namely as skeletons or D tier, but more about the general feel of the units themselves, and their build path and their viability. Okay, if it was viable, okay, just ignore the skeletons being here. Well, don't, but understand that I very personally hate them. So, hope you enjoyed watching. Join me on stream on twitch.tv/LexShav. I stream almost every single day. And I'll be seeing you guys on the next tier list video, or a guide video. I'll be having both of them coming out pretty soon. Bye bye.